everyone, Aaron Lovejoy here from Miniature Monthly, and today I'm going to help you bling out your true metallic metals. That's right, we're going to make everything shiny. The first thing we need to establish is what makes things look shiny. We see shiny stuff every day, but what registers in our brain that makes us know that it's shiny? There are websites you can go to. In fact, I've had students in my classes show me these sites explaining the theories behind how the light reflects off the metal and blah, blah, blah. And it's all very technical and I just don't get it. But what I've done is I've broken things down into some easily digestible kind of rules that you can choose to follow if you want. If you don't, your armor's gonna look like crap. No, just kidding. These are my rules for how to make light look shiny and why it looks shiny. So let's get into this. Number one, light tends to travel on shiny surfaces. If you look at my t-shirt here, the light is hitting it and it just sort of absorbs and goes into one general area. It kind of diffuses into the area that it hits. It will never move. So if my lights are coming from the side, from this side, it's going to hit and it's going to stay right there. If I'm wearing metallic armor, you are going to see the light come in, hit, and it's going to move forward and then exit the armor at the point where the armor bends and the light can no longer travel any further down, and it will blast back at your eyes. This is a typical thing. If you're driving down the street, you'll see, like if you're looking at a car or something big metal building on the side of the street, as you drive down there, you'll see the highlights moving on that metal building or that metal object. It's always moving to the optimal point where it blasts back at your eyes, where you perceive it. So someone behind you will see that same highlight in a different spot on the building. Rule number two is light is a circle. And this can be evident here in these pictures of this armor. And you can see very clearly some evidence of circular highlights. And basically what this is it's the sun or a light source reflecting off the armor itself. And generally, lights and the sun are round. So you always want to have a little of this dynamic in your true metallic metals, in your highlights and all that. Now, the one thing that will break up that circle of light is if you notice in this picture, we have a lot of highly reflective stuff. So the reflections actually will break up those circles of light. You can still see it a little bit on his shoulder pad and in his chest plate, but it's not nearly as evident. And it also kind of looks like a hot mess. So be careful when you're doing reflections in your metallics. You want to do a little bit of reflections, but not too much, because if you do, it just kind of doesn't look all that good. And no matter what you do, definitely keep a little of that element of the circle of light in there to make things more natural and believable. All right, we hear it all the time. Metallics have to have tons of contrast to look like metallics. And this is a perfect example of that. This picture right here, look at the shoulder pad. Light, dark, bam, bam, bam. His wrists, super, super contrasty. But wait a second, let's take a look at his elbow. Now, would you call that contrast? Well, it's definitely contrast against the rest of the picture. For sure. You have an area that's almost completely filled with light and literally barely any darkness at all. Be sure that when you're painting that your light placement is appropriate or your contrast is appropriate to the angle of the light and the shape of the object that you're painting. In this case, that elbow guard is flat and it's pointed directly back at the light source, which could be a light or the sun or whatever. And it will literally reflect the entire amount of light that's coming at it. Whereas like on his wrists, that is a tight spiral, a tight cylinder, and it's going to show more reflections of the area around it, and that light source is going to be squished so that it looks, well, more contrasty. Let's take a look back at one of our original pictures, and this one, now, this still, to me, looks like armor. It looks like shiny armor. Maybe not super shiny armor, but it's definitely got a metallic sheen to it. However, there's not a whole lot of contrast here. Aside from the shadows under the helmet and the eye slits and all that, I think what really helps this image is the fact that we jump from a mid-tone gray to a very almost white light. Like, look at the shoulder there, where the light sort of explodes off the curve of the shoulder. Definitely much brighter and more intense than all the areas around it. Take a look up at the eye slit. You'll see a very bright highlight right next to a very medium gray tone. This jump in levels will give you that metallic sheen that we're all looking for. Now I'm going to do a little Photoshop magic. What would happen if I blended out that highlight? If it went from the bright white to a medium gray, but it took a lot longer to do it. Would it have the same effect, or would it be less shiny? As you can see, having those tones jump from like a level 5 midtone to a level 1 highlight in a very short amount of time definitely gives you more of that shiny feel. And one of the last things for metallics, and it's very, very important, metallics have very shiny edges. So be sure to put edge highlights on everything and vary the intensity of your edge highlights depending on where that edge highlight is. So if it's right in the area of a really bright highlight, that edge highlight will get brighter and maybe a little bit thicker. And if it's in somewhere like a little bit deeper in the recesses or somewhere that's not as highlighted, maybe that highlight gets thinner, but it's still very strong. So those edge highlights are key to telling us that this thing is metallic, it's shining, it's glimmering in the sun. Also, you will have very bright, shiny points deep inside of shadows. And this is another thing that metallics do. If there's any light that can get to that deep recess, maybe under the armpit or something, it will have a tendency to sparkle. And that's something that like a t-shirt or a regular fabric will never do. It will never shine. It will never reflect light in a shadow area. So be sure to get those edge highlights on the top of things and on the bottom things. It really does matter. All right, so those are the rules that I live by. It usually gets me about 80% of the way there. It ensures that I will have a decent looking metallic surface. And from there, I can do all kinds of fun stuff. I can put in reflections. I can do some crazy things with the shadows, whatever I want to do. But that gets me most of the way there. And I know that my metallics will look really awesome. So now we're going to jump into the painting, see if you can see where I put these rules into application. So here we go. So today we're going to start with the great John Umber. He is my hero. He is the hostess with the mostest, and he has a nice big sword. So we're going to experiment with a couple ways of making this look shiny. I'm picking two models that are exactly the same because I want to show you kind of the differences in your light placement and how it affects the model. So with this model right here, we have his light. His main light is right over this right shoulder. I think that's a very powerful pose. If he looks at you just like that on the battlefield, oh, I'm a little bit scared, and it looks pretty awesome. So I did it exactly the same on both figures. You can see how it kind of drops off to the left-hand side, the lighting and stuff. So you've got to think the light is coming down in this direction and it's going to hit the sword, boom, like this, somewhere along this line of the sword. Now, the sword is almost parallel. It's a little bit up at an angle, and all these things matter at the end of the day. Typically, when my light is hitting right there, you're going to have the light hit at the upper part of the sword, or whatever's the highest, zenithally speaking, and then it travels down. So it could travel all the way down to the hilt, basically, or it could travel down just a little bit. The angle of the sword, if it was more up like this, I would say the light would hit and it would travel down more. The more flat the sword gets, the light hits and it tends to bounce back at your eyes almost directly. So technically, you could have the entire sword could be all lit, very bright, in the lightest color of your silver. That's not super exciting. The other way of doing it, I could see the light hitting up here somewhere, and sort of sticking and having the brightest area right here on the sword. That would kind of make sense due to the angle of the sword and all that. But that doesn't look, I don't think, nearly as powerful as if the light were to travel closer to the hilt of the sword. What this does is we've got our powerful light situation going on here, and it keeps the light close to the face. So you don't have something that's like, oh, this is interesting, and ooh, and then it pulls me off over here. But you know what? We're gonna try this out and do it both ways and see which one looks better. Who knows? Maybe they both look great. You know what I always say, rules are made to be broken. So let's try this out. So the colors that we're going to use today, we've got Reaper Solid Black, super awesome color. It's a one-stroke black paint. Citadel's Leadbelcher is going to be our silver. Now, to highlight the silver, we're going to use Vallejo Model Airs Aluminum. It is going to be a rock star for us. Now, to adjust our colors, I'm going to use a little of this Scale Color Artist Acrylics. This is the brand new paints that just came out, and now a lot of people are getting their Kickstarters fulfilled right now. This is their primary blue. We will be adding this to add some bluish tones, maybe the sky, I don't know. We've also got some Iosin Green from P3. This is a good sort of middle of the road green color for adding maybe vegetation or whatever. I'm also going to have colors of dirt, so Mournfang Brown, Rhinox Hide from Citadel, and maybe even some Baylor Brown. So we'll see. This usually makes things look a little bit dustier and older, so I don't know if I'm going to put this color in, but I always have it on my palette just in case, because I don't know what colors I'm going to need. So I have kind of specific colors, like my Baylor Brown, black, white, all those colors. Generally, I put those on my palette all the time, regardless of whether I think I'm going to use them or not. Without further ado, let's get rolling on this. Bam! So we're going to start with the first one. And this will be our guy. Let's put the light source way up here towards the top. And I always put my light in a circular fashion. I think to start this, I'm going to add a little bit of airbrushing just so that we can see where the light will go right off the bat. So grab my new Vex airbrush, and we will spray. By the way, this is a new airbrush from Badger, made specifically for myself, Matthew Fontaine, Sergio Calvo, and Matt Sexwish. It is going to be an awesome airbrush, and I really like it because it sprays both. I can spray my primers through it, and I can also spray my inks through it. It does everything. It's a demo model, so you can see all the weld marks and everything. The official ones will obviously have paint and stuff on them. So anyways, that's why I'm using this weird looking airbrush. But just testing it out, making sure everything works great and works for the general consumer. So I'm going to spray up at the top here just to get a general light situation going. So again, putting my 10% sprays. I'm always looking for that circular pattern in everything. So put a little bit more. And I just want to make this really evident where the light is on this piece. So I'm also going to spray a little bit on the hilt here, because that will be obviously gold. and maybe on the handle, top of the hilt there, all those areas. So just like that, our light situation has been put on the sword itself. That looks pretty cool still, but we will see once we start painting it. I'm going to have the same type of thing on the bottom. Maybe I'll spray a little bit more generally, but a little bit bigger. And this is all going to be reflected light from the earth, so we'll see what that ends up looking like in the end as well. Okay, so the second guy, we will put all of the highlight towards the front. So I'm going to keep it right at the front end of this sword, and then very, very bright right next to the hilt. The hilt will be very bright, handle, top of the little knob down there, and that looks pretty cool. So we've got our airbrushing on for both. I'm going to do another general kind of highlighting down here, and I think that will be pretty cool. All right, so I want to get my paint on the model fairly quickly, and since we're just doing the silver here, I forgot to put my highlight silver on, so my aluminum. Okay, so we're going to start off with our midtones and a shadow color. And typically, let's start with putting a little bit of black in the back end of the sword, just to kind of darken our metallics up back there. I'm just going to put that black paint on, just kind of fan it back and forth, get it on there smooth, and then switch him around. This is my typical wet blending, meet in the middle wet blending. I'll put our mid-tone color on and then start bringing it back into the black, kind of slowing my brush stroke down so that it blends. I think that looks pretty cool. I think at this point, maybe I'll even add a little bit of the blue. Kind of put this in the dark black area. Move it back forward. Not even sure that did all that much, but it's at least a start. I'm going to go ahead and add more of this, of our Citadel Silver, and just kind of bring up the color a little bit. So it's a little bit darker in the back, lighter in the front. From below, I think I will go ahead and grab some silver and maybe add a little bit of my Mournfang Brown into it. And maybe a little bit, do a little bit of a green mixture. These are sort of earthy colors. And we can come in from the bottom. I'm going to do my greenish color closest to him. And grab some brown and paint the brown color from the opposite direction. It's still silver, just a little bit brown in there. If I think I need some more, I can grab some more on my brush, lay it in real lightly, see that right on top of the silver, and then sort of just massage it down the sword. And that gives me a little bit more of that brownish color on the bottom. I feel like the green is not super evident either. And this is where you just start adding those tones. And maybe they're not even like green to brown. It's like green to silver to a little bit more green in here. You wipe my brush off a little bit on my puddle pad. And now I've got couple different shades of green going, some brown. That looks like some sort of vegetation down there. And the top of our sword is starting to dry. So now we've got basically kind of our general vision. I'm going to grab a little bit more bluish tones and just going to kind of lay them in here and see what happens. Again, maybe not solid, just kind of popping them in here. What I'm looking for is just the color to change a little bit. Just like that. And up here. So that looks pretty cool. Want to start immediately bumping up my highlight here. So we've got our biggest circle of light here at the base of the sword. So I'm going to grab a little bit of the aluminum, and I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. I think my Artist Opus size 2. That was our big number 8 brush there. So I'm going to grab a little bit of the aluminum, maybe add just a little bit of blue into it. So it's just sort of a light blue, super light metallic color. And if you wanted to, you could choose not to do this, but I just like adding a little bit of my environment in there. And paint's still a little bit wet, so I'm using that to my advantage. I'm just kind of lightly laying this paint over the old paint, and it's kind of bringing up the shadow. I'm also running my brush up this edge on the sword because there's that little V-shaped lip in there in the middle of the sword, so we can actually highlight that pretty good. I can run that highlight all the way up the sword. That's already looking kind of cool. All right. So you're always asking yourself, or I'm always asking myself, how is this light, what parts of the sword is it hitting the most? And get my glasses on. And obviously this lip right here is going to get hit. It's going to get nailed by light, by the direct light that's coming in forward like that. So I'm just going to pull using my real fine tip on this Artist Opus brush, laying a highlight in there. Now, the other thing I can do is I can lay a shadow color. Maybe I'll mix my brownish metallic color in there. And I'm going to put that on the other inside edge. This is where you got to be careful. Hold your breath, whatever you got to do. And there's a little lip on the inside edge. I'm going to hit that with dark paint. I'll just keep reloading my print brush if nothing happens. Just kind of pull my color up. Sometimes maybe it's better if you do this first and then put your highlight on second. It all depends on how your painting is. But you see that made a dark line, and then I've got my bright highlight on the area right behind it. That metal is curved up like this, and the light's hitting it. Bam! It's just pounding right off. So, got that. I will also start establishing some dark lining. Maybe I'll grab my Mournfang or my Rhinox hide and mix that with some black. Clean out my brush here. And just grab a very little bit of it. And we can start adding some dark lining between the silver and where the gold areas are going to be. And we can also do that dark lining in that crack right here. Maybe keep building up those colors. If you go outside the lines, this is a great spot to just kind of wipe it off with your finger. And we just keep adding little bits. Boom, boom, boom. All right, so it's already looking a little bit sparkly. The leading edge of this sword is going to get hit with that light as well. So I'm going to grab some of my aluminum again, place the model on its side like this, and just use the side of my brush and lightly hit the areas I think would get tagged with that light. And it's okay if you roll it around this edge, because the edges of metallic things oftentimes light in, not like when the light hits here, it will actually run around that edge, and so it'll still stay lit. And I will reinforce the lighting up here in the front. So just keep putting it on. Also notice I didn't hit the inside hook right there. I hit the other side of it. I hit this side of it because the light's coming in, and even though the metallics, like I said over here, wrap around, right here I'm not going to do that because I want it to be a bright blast of light right there and nothing right there. So, and since that area is already very light, we can't risk making everything highlighted. If everything's highlighted, nothing's highlighted. So that's kind of the rule. Now I'll just keep grabbing my highlight color, and I'm going to come back into this little ridge right here. And I'm just going to keep hitting it. Maybe even use the side of my brush. You just got to be real careful that you don't hit all the shadow parts that you just put in. Now we ran it all the way up, but now I'm just going to concentrate in this bottom part, the part where my light is the brightest. And I want to slowly make that line thicker and thicker right there. See how it almost looks brighter in the front than the back? That's what I want. Maybe on this back side of the sword, I will add a little bit more of my mid-tone color. Some of this bluish. You'll notice, like when I put my paints on, especially if they're still wet, I'm very, very light with my touch, and that oftentimes will help facilitate that blend. See how I just blended those colors in right there? I did that with a very, very light touch. So keep working on your the lightness of your touch and see how the colors react to that. So we've got a little bit shinier. You can see it where at certain angles it really reflects off of those shiny colors that we put on. Keep right here is going to be a real blast of color, or a real blast of light. So I will put in just our straight aluminum. I want it to kind of fade out to my darker colors up here. You see that's really starting to show up better there. Now I'm noticing my highlights in the back end of the sword aren't quite as noticeable anymore. So I'm going to reapply a little bit right on the edge here. Notice I'm steadying my finger on my other thumb, and my thumb's actually holding the sword just a little bit. And then I'm just coming in very lightly and running down that side of the sword. We can also hit this top part where it's kind of angled. And there we go. A little bit more. I'm going to continue adding my dark concoction of Rhinox hide and black and Mournfang brown and all that stuff. And keep adding that to my, right here where it's going to switch to gold. So I get kind of a dark line there. And anywhere where it kind of comes out too far, I'm going to reapply some of this aluminum and reclaim some of the areas that I'm losing, or that the dark lining came out too far on. So that dark lining is real tight. All right, so we got that. Now maybe we can start adding, add a little bit more of this blue. It's getting it real thin on my brush. Again, just kind of lightly coating it on. And I want to start building up some of our blue sky, clouds, whatever is on top here. Maybe we'll even add a little bit of this green. So I'm going to grab some green, thin it out on my brush, real thin. Again, it's fairly thick paint still. I didn't thin it really, but I'm putting just a thin layer on, and we'll kind of get it. Maybe there's some trees in the distance or something that are reflecting, or some trees up above him that are reflecting. Kind of like that. So I can also see that my highlight has gotten a little bit big on this side. So let me grab a little bit of a darker color on our palette from before. It's kind of the blue mixed with the silver. And we'll just kind of darken spread those out. Kind of knock our highlight back just a little bit. Okay, cool. All right, so then constantly going back to my highlight colors. Going back between your highlights and your shadow colors is going to happen a lot. But I'm going to keep reinforcing my big explosion of light right here. Maybe even go outside the lines a little bit at the top, so that I have a nice bright aluminum color at the very base of this blade. All right. Kind of sort of like that. And, oops. Don't worry too much if you go outside the lines. Just catch it real quick and continually push paint back. All right. So that is pretty cool. And I think up at the top of this thing, I want where the metal kind of flicks up, and that little V-shaped ditch thing, whatever it's called, is stops. That's where some light will reflect a little bit brighter. Just gonna hit up there really nice. Perfect. All right. So that's our initial painting on this. The bottom, I think instead of using our Vallejo, I think we could use just our mid-tone color and place it again in that V-shaped groove on the side that the light would be hitting it, or in this case the bounce light from the earth would be hitting it. And we'll just kind of edge in a little bit of highlights. If that doesn't seem to work, if it's not quite enough, I'm going to grab just a little bit of the Vallejo Model Air, maybe mix it in with our mid-tone color, and come back there. Now it's showing up just a little bit. Can run it again all the way down the sword. on the bottom side of the sword. Just got that little bit of a highlight. Again, I'm going to keep hitting it on the bottom, up by the hilt. And that just makes that light a little bit brighter. That looks cool. There we go. All right. So we've got the sword base coated, and we're ready to make some other adjustments. All right, so for this version, we are going to add a little bit of black paint here at the hilt of the sword. And grab some Leadbelcher and go from our highlight portion all the way back into the hilt. So we'll go there and move it all the way back. And I'm painting that silver all the way through the black. So the black actually ends up having silver in it. And it is, you know, kind of a metallic paint. Then we'll go the other direction. This. And I'm just going to paint our Leadbelcher all the way to the tip. Like that. And we have our base coat. Boom, that was pretty quick. I'll let that dry. I think from the bottom, same type of deal, just maybe a little bit more black. Putting it on, we'll go like halfway up. Sword. Switch back to the other side. And come back around and do the end. I feel like I have too much paint on the brush. I just wipe it off. I just keep wiping the paint around until it goes pretty flat. There we go. That looks pretty cool. Now I'll start adding in some of our brighter colors. So the aluminum, coming from up here, it's probably going to hit, we got our light hitting brightest right there. So I'm going to work out from that point. So kind of, I'm going to make a circular pattern on both sides of light. See that? And then we'll run a highlight down the front side of the sword. If you mess up, always have a little bit of fix-it color ready to go. There we go. I think a lot of times too, when you're placing highlights and stuff like that, the angle of which your brush is hitting is also important. So I'm going to hit that. And that highlight all the way down the sword again. Run it on the inside of this V-shaped thing up here. I'm hitting as light as I can. It's almost like a dry brush, but with wet paint. Just let that paint do the work for you. Here we can kind of see that highlight on the edge there. And then what I'll do is I will add a little bit, get my silver color, my aluminum, and add a little bit of water to it to make a little bit of a glaze. I'm just going to kind of lightly put that in multiple times at the edges of my highlight right there. And sometimes you just have to hit it multiple times. Just keep hitting it until it does what you want it to do, until it starts breaking the edge there. You can't see the brush stroke, and it starts blending it in. So very, very thinned out paint, about probably 50-50 water to paint, somewhere on there. And just keep adding it over and over again. Sometimes you gotta let it dry, and then come back and hit it again. But probably get that in super good. Come back with a little bit thicker paint and make sure to re-hit this top little part where it kind of curves in. I think the light would catch right there really, really bright. And where the sword actually bends, there's a little bit of a kink here. There we go. Hit that, and just want to keep hitting. I think the most important thing is to make sure your colors are super opaque in the center. I will keep hitting it with the thicker paint in the thinner center section. Can't talk. And that will start making it so it doesn't look quite so blotchy. There you go. Maybe we'll hit the back side of the sword as well. With a little bit of a highlight. So these edge highlights are super, super important for making things look shiny. And they have to be very bright. They got to be much brighter than anything else on the model, on the sword itself, because it's got to show up really good. So they really show up in these areas where you have a little bit darker paint. There you go, that looks pretty cool. And you can see some areas like right there, I still have a little bit of a transition. So I'm going to go back to my sort of glazed color and keep hitting it. Now the problem is we run the risk of pulling this highlight color way too far down. So maybe we put that glaze in, and then we make a glaze with our mid-tone color. So a bunch of water. About 50-50 maybe. And just grab a little bit of it. I'm going to start glazing that in back over our highlight color. Maybe pushing it towards where it goes to our mid-tone again. And that color will start softening out those transitions as well. But also start making our highlight a little bit smaller. So we need that highlight to be fairly compact for it to be effective. We need a big jump between our colors. See, I'm kind of just working the paint back and forth. I'm watching where it goes down and how it looks on the model. And then I just keep moving it around. And eventually it kind of settles down and is a perfect, hopefully perfect blend. Still a couple little spots here. I'm just going to keep working at it. Ain't no thing, Jelly Bean. I think part of painting is just being very patient. Alright, so that's looking better. We'll let that paint dry. Maybe put on a couple extra little spots of glaze, and then we can move on. I think at the base of the sword, I'm just going to grab a little bit of black, thin it out, maybe with a little bit of brown, the dark Rhinox hide, and that will give me a darker glaze, and I can come in and just start pushing it into the shadows here. It's not really shadows, it's just the darker part of the sword. The part that we're trying to give a little bit more contrast to. So just keep adding little bits of it. Notice I'm pushing the brush towards the darker area, and then as I pull off, it's depositing most of the paint in that area. It's kind of coloring the areas around it too. As I stroke down the sword, it will slowly make things darker. And maybe we'll put a little bit of this on the tip of the sword as well. We're not trying to make it super dark or anything, but we're just trying to get a little bit of that color in there. Go back to this side of the sword. You see how that's starting to look real shiny. That darkness put in can come back and hit. So you see a lot of this is go in, make it dark, make it light, make it dark again, make it light again, but in progressively smaller and smaller spots. So it just ends up looking really, really cool and really shiny. I'm going to keep adding a little bit of my highlight color on the edging here, but right in this circle of light right there. And I'll let it come up over the top. And just keep insisting on this color, making sure that it's super as bright as it can be, like it is completely aluminum right there, but it's only in that spot. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. I'm even kind of doing little strokes and streaks and stuff. You're not really going to see them, but it will add to the sort of the metallic look of everything. Like if you notice, I've got little bitty micro streaks in here due to my wet blend, the way I blended it. And so that ends up looking pretty cool. We can enhance some of those. And maybe they're actually little scratches and stuff. On some straight aluminum paint. And we can just add a few extra little scratches here and there. this. Little bitty scratches and cracks and crevices and all that good stuff. Kind of back and forth. I'm just laying it on really, really light. If nothing happens, I move on. I don't try to push it as far as I can. It's like almost I'm waiting for happy accidents to happen. Just get those little scratches there. All right. And we'll go a little bit. Another little glaze over here, or dark color. Dark brownish black. And do the same thing on the other side. All right, and that looks pretty cool. You see, it doesn't take super long to get it in there fairly quickly. Let's take a look at both of them. So different kind of swords. I think over here I did more of the scratches, so I'm gonna upgrade this one because you can't have one all scratched up and not the other. So I'm gonna first put in some of my dark glaze there. I'm gonna put in towards the top of the sword here. Just make it a little bit darker. Looks kind of cool. And then I'm going to add my aluminum glaze here at the hilt of the sword. And again, I'm going to try to push it towards the bottom, both sides. And then grab some of my straight aluminum that doesn't have any water in it. And again, really try to hit this bottom area of the sword. It's closest to the hilt. That's where our light source is bouncing off of. So I'm just going to put that in. And then we will add some little scratches, just like we did with the other sword. And I think these scratches really help to kind of break things up and make it not so... Like even it will help on areas where... like right here, the green just kind of abruptly ends. So what if there's a scratch right there? Again, really light on the scratches. If nothing happens, move on. Push it too hard, sometimes you end up making a really thick scratch and it doesn't look very good. So I'm going to grab some of our mid-tone silver glaze. Maybe push back the shadow a little bit. And push it back more on the back side of the sword. And put it up over all these scratches and cuts and dings. And grab some more of our dark color. Maybe since the sword is beveled on this one side, maybe away from the light source, it's going to get a little bit darker at the top than on the other side. So I'll just keep adding a little bit more, a little bit more. Again, putting more into our dark lining and shadow areas. get my brush to behave. Just a little bit darker. Maybe a little darker on this side. This, the tip of the sword kind of curves off, so maybe it would catch a little bit of darker light. Or not darker light, but just darkness. So I'm going to kind of do that side a little bit darker. Let's do it on this one too. Just to kind of show that the angle changes. That part of the sword. That looks pretty cool. Since we put colors into this one, I'm going to again make some glazes with our blue and our green, and we're just gonna try to keep laying that in spots. Some of this green. Just slightly. You can kind of see how you can do this. It's not too hard, and maybe you'll have some really good ideas of how to incorporate your colors into the sword, or just leave it fairly, straightforward, light to dark. Boom. Just like this. I think the thing that looks weird about this sword, and this is what I'm constantly looking for stuff like this, my highlight color actually goes up higher on this side than on this side. It stops right about there. So I need to push the highlight back down on this side. So maybe we'll start with some of our glaze from our Leadbelcher, and we'll just start pushing this. Maybe we'll go all the way down with it because it's just minutely changing the color. And maybe at the top of that sword, do more of the glaze, the darker glaze around that edge. And that will start looking better. Still need this to be knocked down some more, so. And a little bit more. I think that's looking better. All right, so let's switch gears and do the gold, and we'll do the hilt of the sword, the handle, hilt, all that stuff with the gold, and see how that looks and see how it matches our colors that we've already got on there. So just keep thinking, which way do you like it better? It really doesn't matter at the end of the day. This one, obviously I'm trying to pull in my focus right here. But even with this sword, when you're looking at it, it kind of, the light's right here, which is right across from his face. So maybe it also helps bring focus to the face. So that being said, I'm going to switch out my palette and we're going to do our gold. All right, so for our gold, I'm going to be using some scale color paints here. This is Negro Gold. It's the darker gold. We've also got a color which has been rubbed off, Elven Gold, and it is more of a yellowish gold, so it'll be a good mid-tone. We've also got Citadel's Arlic Armor Gold. And this is the absolute worst color you can use to base coat a model because it's just like bubblegum inside. However, it is a fantastic color for putting highlights on. It's really good because it's it's light, but it's also very vibrant. It's got a vibrant yellow to it. And remember, we're always talking about the vibrancy of color. Saturated color shows up better. So this color is going to show up really well, even over a color like this. For our last highlight, we're using the Citrine, I don't know what this color is called, gold from Scale Color. It comes in the gold pack, and as you can see, it is very light. Still fairly saturated with yellow, but not nearly as much as, say, the Arlic Armor Gold. So this one I think will show up better, but this one will give us some bling, really bright highlights on things. So we've got those colors down. I'm going to go ahead and grab some of our darker gold and start applying it. And I'm going to kind of follow my original zenithal highlight, I guess you call it. So I'm going to start with it way out here on the far side of this hilt. And bring it on across, grabbing some of our mid-tone gold. If you notice, I didn't even clean off my brush, and we will add that to the other side. I'm just pressing real lightly so that the gold goes down in a very even fashion. And there we have it, light to dark, poof. And I grab some of the dark color again, and let's put it on the sides of this hilt here. I think it will look cool here, and maybe up here, like that. And then I'll use our mid-tone color again as we get closer to the sword itself. Get that highlight in there. Not really a highlight, it's just a mid-tone. But it could be a highlight over here because this is actually on the shadowy side of the sword hilt. So get that in there. On the front of the sword, that light's going to be blasting. So I think grab some of our darker color, put it right next to the hand. And as it comes out, our mid-tone color will explode on the end of this hilt right here. Poof, like that. So that looks pretty cool. I think I'm just going to go with the darker gold, the top half of this up here. I think that is good for now. The tip of the side will go dark gold, and yeah, I think that's pretty good. So this really does match our brightness right here, and then it just gets darker that way. So you might have been asking yourself, like, why do I put opaque colors glazed over these metallics? And then why at other times do I put the metallics on and just either shade the metallics or use a darker metallics for my shadows? So basically what I'm doing is when I put those opaque colors over the metallics, that is kind of nullifying their sheen, and also it makes that area darker. No matter which direction I look at the model, it will always be darker because I'm not allowing the metallics to shine back naturally. And this helps me create like faux shadows in the metallics and control the light a little bit better. Otherwise, every time you look at this, even in these areas down here, it's going to be like super shiny. Even though it's a dark metal, it's going to be super shiny. So if I put those opaque colors over them, I can control that and make my shadows wherever I want. So on this one, we're going to do it a little bit differently again. So let's just see what things look like light-wise. So I'm going to put a little bit of our dark color at the tips of the hilt here. Maybe a little bit more on this side. And then grab our mid-tone color and run it from the center back out to that shadow color. Again on this side. Run it from the center back out to our shadow color. So I'm trying to make a highlight right in the middle, or a brighter spot right in the middle. Just like that. Let's go ahead and cover up all this stuff. That'll probably be a gemstone or something eventually, but for now, I'm just going to make it gold so it doesn't mess with my vision at all. And then on this side, let's go, instead of doing a midtone and a shadow on the side, we're going to do a shadow and a deep shadow. So I'm going to put the shadow up here, and then I'm going to grab a little of my color, a little bit of the Rhinox hide, a little bit of the black to get a really dark shadowy gold. And put it right up in that crack. So what that does is it makes the top of that sword just explode. Just absolutely explode. So that's good. I'm going to make it real dark on the side here as well. We can always come back and change this stuff later. But for now, let's just see what it looks like. And I really encourage you to experiment with this and just see what looks good, what doesn't. As you can see, it goes fairly quickly. That's why I'm always harping on you to learn how to wet blend well, because you can just play around with colors. When you hear people talking about playing with colors and stuff, they're literally just putting the colors in and playing with it, see what happens. So you get your wet blending down real good, and it will serve you well for practicing and figuring new stuff out. So we got that. We got that. So those are the differences in the two blades. Now I think I will come back on this one, and we want to insist on color. So again, we're putting our mid-tone gold down. I want it to be just opaque, super opaque. As I'm running out of that gold, I'm trying to hit this area up right on the sword right there. You can see where there's a line. So I'm just trying to come back in and erase that. Really lightly. Just keep touching it, moving the paint around until I feel like it's starting to do what I want it to do. So now that line is starting to go away. You can still barely see it, like from that angle right there, but from other angles, it's starting to just completely disappear. So I like that. Let's double check on this one. It's very important because of this saturated color, this very yellowy gold. It's very important that wherever it is in your highlight area or your mid-tone area, it needs to be fairly opaque, because then it's really, really going to shine. Really, really, really. Okay, so just... You see that? Just multiple brush strokes. I'm just watching and waiting for either the part that I'm trying to fix to get fixed or just the color to look right to my eyes, or the blend to look right. All right, so we got that. I am going to start darkening those shadow areas now, and I wonder, yeah. So I want to make this shadow much darker up here and this shadow a little bit darker. So I can grab some of my Rhinox hide, maybe a little bit of black, and we'll make a glaze out of it. Again, whoa, that's way too thin. So I'm going to add a little bit more black, a little bit more Rhinox hide, thicken that up just a little bit. I think that will probably be good. And we'll just start laying it in. And darkening up this area. And then on this side, just a little bit. So maybe on this side, I'm going to do my brush strokes, and instead of stopping right at the end and letting that paint come off, I'm just putting my brush all the way off. Just like this. I don't want, see how that color's moving back? I want it to kind of get brush stroked all the way off. This is another good opportunity. If I grab some darker colors, start laying them in, my dark lining of the actual sword blade. That looks good. I will also start putting it in around this my gemstone area. Now, don't worry if you seem like your shadow got a little too far or you left a brush stroke or something. It's not the end of the world, because we can come back in and do some glazes with our metallics. And the glazes with the metallics tend to work really, really well. So it's not the end of the world if you kind of mess up a little bit here, especially in the shadows. More right there. That's starting to look real shiny. This one, remember, is all light down here and darker up there, so we can probably make our dark area maybe a little bit longer. And just remember, as you're putting everything in, your darkest areas in your metallics are going to be the best areas to put little edge highlights on. So don't worry if you feel like you're going a little bit too dark in some spots, because it might actually look pretty cool at the end. So again, it's just a matter of doing it and getting better, training your eyes to see like, okay, this area is dark enough, this area is not dark enough, but also knowing that you can fix anything that you make a mistake on, and you can also make things darker, make things lighter. You can make all kinds of cool adjustments at the end of the paint job. So nothing is really set in stone. You see, I'm just kind of wringing the outside edge of that gemstone area. I'm going to really darken that area between his hands and the bottom half of the sword there. Sometimes when I have barely any paint on my brush, I will go ahead and still do some brush strokes. I know that I can't really mess up, but it can only enhance the paint job. So maybe I'm putting very lightly some darker paint up towards the top of the sword there. So that ends up looking pretty cool. All right. And I think I want to put some darkness under here. And remember, on the insides of these, we went darker towards the outside edges and lighter towards the center. My thinking there is possibly the sword is reflecting a little bit of light, the silver part of the sword, and so it's hitting the gold areas right there. Also, maybe it just looks cool. Metals are very chaotic, and so almost anything works. But at the end of the day, it's the rule of cool, and whatever looks cool, that wins. So doesn't necessarily have to go along with how you perceive light hitting the sword. It just matters that it looks good at the end. Okay, so we've got these two swords, or we've got our shadows in a little bit further. And now we'll start adding more highlights. So the first highlight will be done with our midtone color. And that's going to go into areas like this, where there is shadow. So I'm just rolling that up, that part of the sword, right on the tip here. And it's in part of the sword. You can put it in the areas where it's already that mid-tone color. It's not going to hurt anything. Maybe it'll reinforce some stuff. And this is where it gets important, because we put all that dark lining in there, and now we are going to hit the edge right there. That looks cool. You might be asking yourself, why, if the light's hitting this direction, shouldn't there just be all highlights on this edge of the sword and not on the other edge? But on metallic surfaces, light will highlight off the back edge of things. So this helps us out because it helps us be able to define those areas better. And it also tells us that this is metallic. So you don't have to worry about everything coming from directly from the light source. So, again, typically the less paint you have on the brush, the better. So we'll put a little bit of that on. See how that just shows up? Shows up really well. And that's because of all the yellow that's actually in this paint. Really, really shows up well. All right, so we got that on there. And maybe, I think it'll look cool. Kind of debating back and forth if I want to have the highlight on the inside of this really prominent or not. But I think it would actually show up pretty well, because if the light's coming in this way, it's gonna hit, and it would definitely hit off that curve. Really, really brightly. There we go. Yeah, you can see that good there. Okay, got that. I'm going to do it again on this one, so you can see it. So we've got our really dark area. Put edge highlight up on top of that. Side here, same principle. I think that it would reflect really bright off the top part of there, and maybe less towards the bottom. And then do it again. This area is already that color, but that's okay. We will just highlight it anyways. Again, don't freak out too much if you have small imperfections in the paint or anything, because that's actually can turn into scratches, battle damage, all that stuff. So maybe, a couple of areas like right up in here, I'm having a little bit of issues. maybe I don't worry about that. I mean, you could continually work at it and get the blend perfect, but I think at the end of the day, there's so many scratches on the sword itself. I think that there'd be lots of little scratches on the hilt here, so I think that will work. And let's do. Bottom end of the sword. Put my dark color down there, mid-tone. Wipe it off, move it around, blend it in. There, sweet. Oh, another spot that would have a highlight would be the underside of the sword here. Again, that same principle of the highlights go off both edges. A little bit of light down there. I could do the same thing on this guy. Rock and roll. The bottom edges of these things, side part. I made those dark so they will light up. See that? That looks cool. The top is done. Do it on this one as well. We got the side, but we gotta do the bottom. Well, you know, these swords are kind of coming together. And it hasn't taken too awfully long. I'm going to go ahead and paint the handle part of the sword black. Just to kind of black it out. There we go. I'm going to keep driving some more my dark lining. Notice I just keep coming back to stuff. That's the key, especially when you're doing display level work. You just got to keep coming back to it and keep adding. At least for me, it's the key. Maybe it won't be for you, but just keep adding to the mess. So in this case, I'm just doing straight black because I want it to be really, really dark right there on the edge. Maybe a little bit, really, really dark. The sword here as well. Cool. Now we can start adding highlights. Or more highlights. We'll get our citrine color or whatever the heck it's called. Leave it to me to rub off the name of the paint. So this stuff you're going to want to put in areas where the light's directly hitting, like that, boink. I don't usually put it on the back side of things. There's a little bend in the sword right here, so it'd probably pop that highlight up. Maybe back here, even though it's the back side, it curves out, so the sun would hit it perfectly. Plus, maybe it'll just look cool. There's a little bit more of that color. And around the edge there. I think maybe where the sword bows up right here. So you see, I'm already breaking my rules. I said not to put it on the backside, but there are areas where it would probably look good on the backside of the sword. So just a little spot of light back there. Yeah, that looks cool. Because when it's like this, that makes sense that it would hit up there. Also, I think that where it rounds up in the center part would be a spot that would attract a glimmer of light. That looks cool. And if we get a little bit of that down by his hand, we just, you guessed it, come back in with our dark lining and knock it back down. And that way it looks super shiny. If you want a real glimmer of light, like right there, we put our highlight right on the edge here, but maybe it rolls over onto the main part of the sword. And now it's starting to look really shimmery. Take our two colors, mix them together, create sort of an in-between color. And if I feel like it needs to blend a little bit more right there, I can do that. And then I'll put in my little spot of light, just a dot. So that's looking pretty cool. We'll switch back to our other one. Again, we'll start with edge highlighting first. This one's going to get blasted down here with light. Maybe this whole final tip of the sword will be really, really bright. There we go. Back side of this. Back side of that. That. I think that looks pretty cool. And we'll black out our gemstone area. So we can see things a little bit better. Do it on this one. So on this one, I am noticing I'm an idiot and I kind of did it wrong. So let's fix this. So we'll make this bottom part a little bit darker. Let's get our sort of middle tone colors reestablished in here. This is a great exercise on showing you how to fix something that I messed up. So I had that sparkle of light right there in the center, but this one was actually the one that had the sparkle of light down towards the bottom. And actually where the center of this piece is, that's where all the brightest light is. So that being said, I'm going to put some highlights in, a little bit of our Arlec armor right on this part that's swooping up. And then we'll grab our citrine color, or whatever it is, and put it right on top, put it around the bottom of this, of the gemstone area. And now that part is shiny. And the bottom part is darker. Maybe we'll do a couple more, just little brief, just to make sure that it totally got darker down there. We'll grab our mid-tone color and swing it on down. So we didn't want this super dark, but we also don't want it super light. So we've got our light part up here, darker part down there. Grab our Arlec armor. Reestablish our highlight on the edge there. Reestablish our highlight right there. And just make sure that the highlight up here is the one that's the brightest. There we go. And we can put a little, since this is a corner, put a little dot of light right there. There you have it. Now you got all that. We can then grab some of our black and Rhinox hide and start fixing areas that maybe where I have mistakes or need to look like there's little scratches. You don't need a million scratches, just a few. Kind of see those in there. And then we'll grab our brightest highlight and try to put it on the back side of these scratches, like where the sun's coming this way, it would hit on the back side of the lip of the scratch. And you don't necessarily need to highlight the areas where you put little dark scratches, but you definitely want to have some definite highlights and some definite shadows going on in there. That. Back, dark line again. See that? It's just back and forth, back and forth. We'll take a look at both of our dudes here. And different areas of the highlights, different ways of like adding some color on this guy. We didn't add any color on that guy. You know, maybe this looks a little more stoic, more like I have a history book or something, but then maybe this one's a little more artsy. So depending on how you want to do it, you know, you can do it either way. And now I think I want to add a little bit of airbrushing just to kind of drive some of our shadows down a little bit more and make things a little bit more finished, more polished. All right, so for the airbrushing, as you can see, I still got my cups pretty dirty in there, but it is okay. Most of the wet paint is gone, and I'm just going to start adding some colors. I'm going to use this Liquitex Burnt Sienna, transparent Burnt Sienna. It is a real good orangish brown. That'll give us some sort of life tones in our painting. Maybe it'll mimic a little bit dirt or just the environment or whatever. So I'm going to put it on the back sides of this particular sword, just real lightly. And if you want to see how much I'm spraying on, it's literally just a little bit. So I'm not going to see a whole lot of change. I'm just noticing that it's a little bit browner towards the end. I'm also going to put it up on both sides of the gold. Just a little bit deeper on both sides. I'm kind of digging that. Don't have to put a whole lot. And you don't have to put any if you really don't want to. But I kind of like doing it. I think it looks pretty good. On this particular sword, we're going to definitely do it in the edges there. So that's our first color. It's not super dark, so don't think it's going to be like a full-on shadow or something. Spray the underside of that little knob. Do it on both guys. Just a little bit. Again, just to show you how much I'm spraying, I'll spray it on his tabard here. Not very much. Just a little bit of change in color. You can also, this is a great time to practice, because you can spray up into like his face, sides of his forehead, see how small of an area you can get the color. Things like that are awesome. All right, so we'll switch to a darker brown, which will be our transparent burnt umber. I always give the inks a good shake. These inks don't generally settle too much, but the more opaque colors do. So you always want to give it a good shake just to make sure everything's good and shooken up. Spray out the excess. Now we got that nice dark brown. Now this dark brown it's transparent, just like the burnt the burnt sienna, but it doesn't color quite as much unless colors are already fairly dark. So we'll use this to our advantage. I want to hit at the top of the sword again, and I'm coming in at an angle like this because it's not going to spray on the front side of the sword. It's not. Hopefully not. In theory, it won't. So a little bit more there. I'm going to spray some in the very top of that side and the very top of this side. Because remember, we made it lighter in the middle and darker on both ends. But see how that's just kind of giving us a cool little tint of color? I'm digging that. Then you come back in, do a little bit more. Oops. Yes, I like that. This will just give your metallics a richness of color. These colors are not metallic at all, so they are, but they are a little bit shiny, which is great because that keeps the metals looking, well, shiny, even when they're not technically shiny because of metallic flake or anything like that. So, I'll spray on this end. Now, as you can see, I kind of still have that highlight going on, but it's been toned down. And I can either leave it toned down like that, or I can reapply my highlight. I'm going to get the bottom side of this knob just real lightly. Now, if I was doing this on a real paint job, not just a metallic tutorial, I would have painted the entire model before I start doing this airbrushing, because now I can put some of these brown tones in the arms and the skin, up in the shoulders, everything. It looks really, really cool, and I would get a nice effect all the way around. But since we're just doing the metallics, I'm just doing the metallics on this one. I'm going to do a little bit more darkness up here. And maybe on the other side as well, just a little bit. And the closer I get, the more focused that color will be. And the further away I get, if I get like 2 or 3 inches away, I can put a light misting across the whole sword if I want to. And so that gives me a little bit tighter shadow on the front side of the sword and a longer shadow on the back side of the sword. So you can manipulate your airbrush all different ways. I'll do the same thing over here. Again, let's see on this piece of paper. So that's just a real tight little spray, and then if I come back, I can spray all around it. So that being said, come in close and hit the back side of that sword, and then pull back a little bit and spray up the length of it. And that gives us a cool, very cool look, I think. It's dark. I'm going to come in and hit these edges one more time. It's much darker there. All right, perfect. Let's hit the underside of these little knobs one more time. Do the other one. You can see why I like to do armies and stuff this way, because I can just motor through. I'll even hit, we had done this one darker at the right where his hand is and lighter further down. So I can also hit that with a little bit of ink. What was the other one like? The other one was just dark all the way across, so we'll be okay there. All right, perfect. Got that and that. Now for the deep dark, and we will switch. If you notice, I'm not even washing out my ink. It just doesn't matter that much, especially with these colors. These colors are all kind of dark. Maybe if I went from the Payne's Gray, which is this one, Payne's Gray, to one of my browns, I might actually wash out, but since the Payne's Gray will overtake the brown very easily, I'm just going to switch to Payne's Gray. So, I'm going to do a little bit on this one. I want to hit this top part that's very dark, and I want to make it even darker. So you see that? Just a little bit of spray. You see that? I made even less of a spray. So you want to get your precision down. Keep practicing those 10% sprays, because they are going to be your rock star at the end of the day. So I just barely saw my color change a little bit, and now I've got a nice deep dark shadow right there. I'm going to put one on this side, but I'm going to try to do it even less. So what I'm going to do, so hold it in my hand like this so you can see. I'm going to spray off the model. I'm going to try to hit my finger right next to the sword. Just do it further away so I can see where it is. Okay? And then there. And the overspray just nicked the edge of the blade, or the edge of the hilt there. So that looks actually really cool. Digging that. Whoops. If it goes too much, don't worry about it. We'll live to fight another day. So maybe I need to be precise, so I want to constantly be checking my dry tip. And I will actually just take off the cover here. Whoops. And the pads of my fingers, make sure there's no dry tip on there. The really cool thing about this new airbrush that I'm testing out here is I can flip this front piece around, and now I've got a needle cover so you don't bend your needle. I'll save you some grief there. I don't typically use a needle cover because I want to be able to get to my needle, and I've learned over the years to be very careful, so which is something you should learn too. But at least this new airbrush can help you out there. All right, so hit that. Hit a little bit in that pummel. And then the back end of the sword, I want to get a little bit darker. So again, we will come in from an angle. Now you might be asking yourself, I'm covering up some of my highlights and stuff. I got to put them back in. And isn't that going around in circles and being slow? Technically, yes, but also I need to see those highlights so that I can tell how my metallics are looking, if they're shiny enough, all that stuff. So sometimes that highlight tells me I can go darker with my shadows. So I need that highlight no matter what. It's a little bit darker there. Boom. A little bit darker at the end of the sword over there. Digging that. The sky, I'm only going to do it darker on this side of the sword. Make sure I got no little clogs. There we go. Nice dark part. Maybe I'll go a little bit dark at the end of the sword too. Just a little bit, not too much. Alright, and now we will just reapply our highlights and be done with it. Alright, so I'm going to grab my, what's this color called again? Arc Armor Gold. And again, we will just make sure it goes on here just right. And the edges, this inside edge for sure, because that looks good. Got our highlight right there. Maybe we'll bring it down all the way. Highlight in the front. I think that looks good. And then we will just put a little blop of our super whitish gold, our last highlight. And then we'll go just in a dot. Dot up here. Get that little bit of dried up paint off the tip of my brush. A little bit big, that highlight, so it's just a matter of, for a gaming piece it'd be perfect, but if you want to go super duper display mode, you want to knock it back just a little bit. So I'll grab a dark brownish black color, put it in right up there, covering up part of that highlight and making things look really tight. Just like that. And let's see if we got our silver, our aluminum. We'll put that in. Again, really lightly, almost like a dry brush. That looks really cool. Sweet. All right, so that's how we make things like super, super shiny with true metallics. Again, we're using very little of our super brightest color, and in both cases, that would be these two colors for the silver and the gold. You want to jump very quickly to either of these colors, like they're literally your final little dot highlights, or something like that. You want to live in your midtones, which for us was this color and this color, the Elven Gold and the Leadbelcher. So you can see those two colors, they jump fairly quickly from a midtone to a dark. And then I used black in my silver to make it darker, and even some of this Rhinox hide just to kind of give it an earthy look. And for the gold, we just used this Negro Gold, which is a really cool color from Scale 75. But it also can be darkened with black or a dark brown, that type of thing. And then we just tied it all together at the end with our inks. And I just used them in conjunction with each other to make a nice flowing blend of color and get our shadows really, really dark. And remember, the inks appear darker because of the semi-gloss properties in them. Also, we're using tricks of the eye, like this Payne's Gray is a bluish black, and that will kind of trick your eye into thinking it's further away or has more depth than actual black. So that works out really well, but the semi-gloss properties in it is really good because it makes things appear darker or more vibrant. So that is really cool. So yeah, that's what our true metallic metal swords look like. I'm actually thinking, this is the funny thing, my first idea was I would like that one better. I actually like this sword better. I think it looks more gritty and rugged. Also, maybe in where they're fighting and stuff, there's more, it's cloudy, it's wintry, there's not a whole lot of greenery around, so maybe the sword would reflect more like this anyways. It's got a little bit of earthy reflections with the browns in it, but maybe not so much as this, where it's like very blue skies and stuff like that. So maybe if they were Lannisters or something, this would look better. I don't know. But again, at the end of the day, it's up to you. You can choose to use whatever colors you want. Now that's the end of the video for today, but that's not all of it. I want you to go and practice painting some shiny metallics. And if you got questions, ask them in the comments or head on over to our Discord page and ask there. I'd be happy to answer your questions. So what did we learn today? Number 1, we learned 4 simple rules that I use to help me paint shiny metallics. Number 2, we saw that learning to wet blend is key to getting your base coats on quickly and setting up that general vision for the whole paint job. Number 3, we learned that cleaning up sort of bad blends or mistakes is really easy with metallic glazes. Number 4, we learned that using opaque colors to shade our metallics helps us control the light and makes everything more shiny. Number 5, oh yeah, we learned the importance of edge highlighting on our metallics. Number 6, once again, we learned how to drive down our shadows using our airbrush and some inks. Man, they just make every paint job so much better if you learn how to use them correctly. You know what I'm always saying? 10% sprays for the win. Oh yeah. Well, that's it for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed the video and you got a lot out of it. Once again, thank you so much for supporting us here on Miniature Monthly.